Hi everyone, I'm Liz Hunter. I'm the Associate Director of Field Sales for Workman Publishing, coming at you from my apartment in Brooklyn, New York, my fall 2020 Reps Picks. His Only Wife by Peace Ajomidi is a smart and engrossing debut novel. The book opens with a marriage plot in a small town in Ghana. Afi, a young seamstress, is all set to marry Elikim, a wealthy businessman who she sort of knows. And really, whether she knows or loves her husband to be is beside the point, because his mom has decided that smart and pretty Afi is the one who can distract Elikim from his long-term relationship with another woman of whom his mother does not approve. The thing that's so fun about reading His Only Wife is that it's a little bit like a romantic comedy. You've got this heroine who you can really root for as she struggles to find her way in her career and her love life. You've got this romance that is complicated, and you've got the conflict between her vision of the future and his vision of the future for them together. But beyond the romance, this book draws on dynamics of power and class in Ghana. And in fact, Kirkus called it a Crazy Rich Asians for West Africa. Author Peace Ajomidi is from Ghana herself, and in addition to writing, she's an expert in gender and international politics, currently working as senior lecturer at the University of Bristol in the UK. The book is out now, and if you are looking for some delicious armchair travel to get you out of your home in these crazy quarantine times, I cannot recommend His Only Wife enough. Our imprint story, based in the Berkshires of Massachusetts, has a long tradition of publishing books that are practical and useful. Books about growing vegetables, raising animals, cooking, crafting. In the curious compendium of practical and obscure skills, the editors at Story have compiled hundreds of different skills, drawing from the books in their vast library. Every page has a step-by-step photos, and it's a delightful mix of things you might actually do, like spatchcock a chicken or sew a pillowcase or fix a broken window, and things that you didn't know you needed to know, like how to French braid a horse's tail, or teach your cat to jump through a hoop, or make a hammock. It's this great big book. It's 9.5 by 12 inches in trim size. It's 344 pages, full color. This is like the best coffee table book ever. It's beautiful, it's useful, and you'll learn some things. Story's Compendium of Practical and Obscure Skills is coming out September 15th. I don't know about you, but it seems like my wine intake may have gone up slightly during quarantine. So what could be a better time to actually learn about wine so I have something to show for all of these months drinking in my apartment? Enter Madeline Meyer, our author of Welcome to Wine. She's got deep roots in the world of wine. She's from a fifth-generation wine family in Switzerland, and she's furthered her apprenticeship in the wine business in the vineyards of her mother's native California. On top of that, Madeline has earned a wine specialist degree. But the feeling of this book is incredibly friendly and approachable, despite her very professional background. It covers the basics, like what kind of glass to use, how to store your wine, suggested food and wine pairings. What really sets this book apart, though, are the illustrations. I find these illustrations to be extremely helpful when you get into the more nuanced parts. How to tell if a wine has gone bad, how to develop your palate, what the aroma tells you. With these illustrations throughout and a paper over board package, this book will make a really great gift to anyone who wants to learn more about wine. The Scapegracers is the first in a new YA series from Erewhon Books, a brand new speculative fiction publisher and distribution client of Workman. In The Scapegracers, an outcast teenage lesbian witch named Sideways Pike forms a coven with the most popular girls in her school, and together they perform some seriously badass magic in the process. Hannah Abigail Clark was still in college when they wrote The Scapegracers. They wanted to read a book with a queer main character, living life beyond the coming out story, which so much LGBTQ plus literature is understandably focused on. And they wanted to read a story about a female friendship that was supportive and empowering. This book is so much fun. Think of the dark humor of Heathers meets the pitch perfect high school setting of Mean Girls, meets the creepy magic in a small town vibe of the Netflix Sabrina reboot. But then take all of that and add in feminist, queer, own voices, and intersectional. And you've probably got your new favorite book. The Scapegracers just published on September 15th. If you like witchy YA, this is going to be so up your alley. Please check it out.
Hey, indie booksellers. I'm Christian Westerman from Workman Publishing. I'm looking forward to connecting with you guys over great books during the show and hearing more about how things are going at your store. Here are some of the fall 2020 titles that I'm especially excited about. I've got How to Astronaut from Terry Virts, An Insider's Guide to Leaving Planet Earth. It's on sale this September, but this is different from other books about astronauts. It focuses more on the daily part of it. There's 51 short chapters in this book where Terry takes you through training, launch, orbit, what spacewalking is like, deep space, and re-entry. Terry Virts, he's the star of this space show in this book. His personality really makes How to Astronaut a great reading experience. He's charismatic, and it's written with such a warm and funny voice. You get a feeling in reading each short chapter that his childish wonderment of space has never left him. He's so enthusiastic about everything, and knowing how tough astronaut work is after reading this, I could only marvel at Terry's unflinching enthusiasm despite the fatigue, risks, and responsibility. It's really inspiring. He talks about things like in-flight entertainment. Yes, they have Netflix and they have Hulu too. He's also talks about what astronauts dream of and falling asleep and being in sleep while you're floating in midair. How do they go to the bathroom, for instance? It's a really fun book. But really, the best part of this book is the astronaut's perspective. Yes, the universe is immense, beautiful, but it's also cold, barren, and inhospitable. Going to space made him realize just how much he cherishes home, which is Earth. I have Let's Get Back to the Party from Algonquin Books. It's just setting the stage a little bit. It's set during 2015, just weeks after the historic Supreme Court marriage equality ruling. And all the main protagonist wants to do, Sebastian Moat wants to settle down. He's a high school art history teacher, newly single and desperately lonely. He envies his queer students and their freedom to live openly, a freedom he did not have in youth as he lost it to fear and shame. So when he runs into his childhood friend Oscar Burnham at a wedding in Washington, D.C., he can't help but see it as a second chance. Now 35, the men haven't seen each other in a decade, but Oscar has no interest in their shared history. In contrast, Sebastian's desire to find love and settle down. Oscar, on the other hand, is outraged by what he sees as the death of gay culture, where bars are overrun with bachelorette parties, friends are getting married and having babies. While Oscar and Sebastian struggle to find their place in a rapidly changing world, each is drawn into a cross-generational friendship that treads the line between envy and obsession. Sebastian, with a gay student whose ability to be wholly comfortable in his own skin, only highlights the years Sebastian spent during searching for self-acceptance, and Oscar with an older icon known for graphic stories of pre-AIDS hedonism. And as Oscar and Sebastian collide again and again, both men must come to reckon not just with one another, but with themselves. Rich with sharply drawn characters and contemporary detail, provocative and emotionally profound, Let's Get Back to the Party will appeal to readers of Garth Greenwell and Rebecca Mackay. These two men are so wonderfully complex. They go beyond just the labels of being gay men. Oscar in particular is so different in that he has thoughts and ideas or feelings about how people are, straight people are celebrating for Gay Pride Month and also taking over gay spaces. It's really interesting and shows you kind of the spectrum and diversity within the actual LGBTQIA+ community. So I'm presenting At the Edge of the Height, which is in the Edelweiss catalog by Catherine Seligman. This book is the winner of the 2019 Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction. This is a biennial award given by the PEN America and Barbara Kingsolver to a U.S. citizen for a previously unpublished work of fiction that addresses issues of social justice. This is from Algonquin Books, and they've had an amazing strike rate with this award, as this is a prize that has introduced some of their best talents to the world, like Lisa Coe, the author of The Leavers, Hilary Jordan, Heidi Duro, and Naomi Benarin. At the Edge of the Height is an important debut novel that expands on the conversation of homelessness in America with a very human story of one 20-something runaway as she discovers her self-worth. The book takes place in San Francisco, which is a city that's been used as a talking point on homelessness in America by political pundits that really don't offer any solutions. The reader is taken through 10 cities, but they're juxtaposed with the Silicon Valley of Google and all these other corporations that are based out of California. And just this time of Trump's America where it's jobs, 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 and America is doing just great. This is the other side. This is taking you into the homelessness communities of San Francisco. The title references the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood of San Francisco, and we follow Maddie Donaldo. She's a 20-something girl with street smarts, but is really directionless at this point in her life. She's left Los Angeles because she feels disowned by her father, and she's also in a lot of disagreements with her mother. So she leaves Los Angeles feeling like she's convinced of who she is. She's going to get away from it all. She's going to be someone different now. And the book actually opens with Maddie finding a murdered teenage boy in a park who's been stabbed, and she experiences the last moments of his life. And this boy is, as the story progresses, is really a mirror of who Maddie is in a way. He is similarly has run away from home, doesn't know who he is, feels that his parents didn't love him enough, and just did not fit in at home. And it's really just this fantastic book about Maddie being involved in the police investigation for the murderer of this boy. She becomes more in touch with the parents of the victim and starts to question things that she's been so used to for the years that she'd been living on the run. Like, why is she stealing things for no reason, really? She starts to care for people that are beyond her immediate friends on the streets. She has a cute dog named Root who follows her everywhere, but there's also human love that she's starting to find again with this victim's family, who are so upset about the death of their son. Maddie really represents homelessness in America today, but also the feeling of uncertainty at this moment of the millennial generation, where you have a society that is moving at a lightning speed and an economy that has priced all these millennials out in terms of affordability of rent and joblessness. And I think all these problems have just been exacerbated by coronavirus, unfortunately. But this book, Maddie's in constant movement. She's being pushed around physically. She's being told that she's not wanted in certain areas of San Francisco. People look the other way and ignore her. But there is still such a great sense of hope in her and her story and her finding out who she is and really breaking down all the things that she believed. She starts to question why, in fact, she did run away. And this book is just fantastic. It shows that change comes through caring for people. And I think it's going to even make, it's going to bring homelessness into the national conversation and make even more socially responsible readers. We're comping to The Leavers by Lisa Coe because it's also won this award. But in a similar way, it's about the unraveling of the American dream, debt, as well as hardship in America. And it's just this through line of powerful storytelling. So get the tea out, and it's got to be English breakfast for these books. Myrtle Hardcastle Mysteries is a new debut middle grade series set in Victorian England. It's reminiscent of Harriet the Spy, Flavia de Luce, and classic books like The Hardy Boys. It's intended for middle graders, but really getting a quick adult following because of how cozy it is, perfect for the fall, and some hot cocoa, for instance, and as well as how well written they are. Readers are introduced to a new heroine, Myrtle Hardcastle, who is a spunky and smart 12-year-old girl who's a Victorian girl of science obsessed with the new sciences of criminology. She's determined to seek out the truth even when nobody else believes her. As one reviewer put it on Goodreads, it's hard to dislike this girl's determination. Books 1 and 2 simultaneously pub this fall on October 6th, and Premeditated Myrtle is the first book in the series, which was recently announced as a Kids Indie Next List pick.
When her elderly neighbor dies, Myrtle is the only one who suspects foul play, and her determined sleuthing takes her into the world of rare plants and forensic science. Myrtle is assisted by a governess and her mentor, the invincible Miss Judson. Together they investigate. Myrtle uses her medical knowledge from her late mother and her legal knowledge from her father to ultimately solve the case with a cast of interesting characters that range from a legal aide to a writer. How to Get Away with Myrtle, and for any Poirot fans or anyone that likes Murder on the Orient Express, this one's perfect. It's a classic Victorian railways holiday in the countryside that is livened up by jewel thieves and murder. Finally, Elizabeth C. Bunce, the author, turned in book 3 recently called Cold-Blooded Myrtle and is planned for a fall 2021 release. I personally absolutely adored Myrtle's strong relationships with her father, who is a court prosecutor, and also her relationship with Miss Judson. These 3 main characters, Myrtle, her father, and Miss Judson, all have moments of conflict in their relationships when they each want different things and they disagree and argue. But in the end, those conflicts strengthen and invigorate their love for each other as they learn from one another. This is brilliant writing from Elizabeth C. Bunce.
Then we have On Fragile Waves, also from Erewhon, but this one is more literary. And it's a profoundly human story. It follows an Afghani family fleeing war who sets off for Australia to start anew. It really centers on a girl named Fairuza, and she's kind of reliving her experiences in a magical, realist way of dreams, as well as what she witnesses when she's moved to Australia, sort of the experiences of the war in Afghanistan, as well as the assimilation in Australia. And I think that what's even really more important here is both areas, both homes to her now are in conflict. There's in Australia, you have sort of the conversation around immigrants, whether they belong or not. That is a form of conflict. And then obviously the violence and the war that was in Afghanistan. Really, really interesting point of view. And this speaks to immigration, the difficulties of quote unquote assimilating. Fairuza runs up against xenophobia, but also what to do about her family traditions and how she traditionally dresses, for instance. But it's for readers of literary fiction about social questions and exploring contemporary political issues, and any reader of speculative fiction with political themes and beautiful prose. Lily traveled to Kabul, Jakarta, and Melbourne, interviewing asylum seekers, refugees, and detainees for this book. During an internship in Canberra, she researched private companies that handle screening, detainment, imprisonment, basically the dirty work of the government, and was really astounded at what they do. And it just feels like such an important book, and it's coming out this December. It really reminded me of Valeria Luiselli's The Lost Children Archives, which is another grand, harrowing journey relived through imagination with urgency and empathy. Up next is Wall Disease by author Jessica Wapner, published by The Experiment. Lost in the discourse surrounding border walls is what happens to the people living up against them. How are their lives and livelihoods affected by the concrete and steel barricades fixed into the ground near their homes and workplaces? What is it like to walk by a giant fence radiating messages that trigger fear and insecurity every day? The term Mauerkrankheit, or wall disease, is a new study about the effects of living in these conflict zones on an individual. Border walls reinforce a sense of hopelessness every day, which can bring on prolonged stress, anxiety, feelings of rage, and even being trapped and oppressed. Author Jessica Wapner comes to the study not as an expert, but as a journalist determined to understand how the multitude of border walls now standing around the globe are reshaping the human psyche. She goes to border zones like the US-Mexico border, the present-day Berlin Wall, South Ossetia and Georgia, Kashmir, Northern Ireland, and the Gaza Strip, all the while interviewing people living in these areas. She brings us inside a new and pressing scientific discussion. We don't know the full extent of this crisis, and we likely never will. But there are clear patterns of psychological harm among populations living near border walls around the world. COVID and climate change have exacerbated these problems. Climate change in particular will likely heighten tensions between people on opposite sides of border walls as people move towards more inhabitable areas. These issues transcend politics because they aren't about any particular wall or any particular country. Every border structure has its own history, its own circumstances, and its own implications. But wall disease can afflict anyone living in a borderland anywhere in the world. We internalize the fact of borders and individual borders we live near. They influence our view of the world and our view of one another. Jessica argues that none of this makes the world safer. Even taking a border wall down, like the Berlin Wall in 1989, doesn't guarantee a relief from these consequences. She says that once a wall goes up, the border is within you.
Made in China tells the story of Sun Yi, a political prisoner in a forced labor camp in China, and the SOS letter that begins author Amelia Pang's investigation. In 2012, an Oregon mother named Julie Keith opened up a package of Halloween decorations. The cheap foam headstones had been $5 at Kmart, too good a deal to pass up. But when she opened the box, something fell out that she wasn't expecting. An SOS letter, handwritten in broken English by the prisoner who'd made and packaged the items. Pang's writing is both clear and insightful without being detached. She illustrates the horror and devastation that prisoners like Sun Yi face every day. She also offers a glimmer of hope towards the end, with small things we can do every day to fight for change and the abolishment of forced labor, and some larger, though she admits that we as individuals cannot stop the Chinese government's abuse of power. That's something that will need to be a much larger effort. Kids are the future is something I heard frequently growing up, and I would always think, well, duh. And now we have As the World Burns by Lee Vandervoo, and my duh moment has never felt so justified. Vandervoo covers the story of Juliana versus United States, what will likely become one of the biggest civil rights cases in history. 21 young people are suing the United States government over climate change, arguing that the government's ignorance and disregard towards the ever-increasing number of natural disasters, wildfires, disappearing coastlines, mass flooding, droughts, is a threat to their constitutional right to life. This book simultaneously filled me with rage and dread. How did we get here? Why doesn't the government care? What are we going to do? And a kind of hope that feels powerful. Because I know these kids are fighting the good fight and they're giving it their all, and their perseverance is not only inspiring more generations of other kids desperate for change, but adults too. I Believe in You is by the Dream Team sister duo, Sabrina and Eunice Moyle. They're the team behind Hello Lucky, and they recently had 2 books come out with Workman on the most recent spring list, ABC Dance and Goodnight Baboon. This is our 3rd book with us, and I love this book. I mean, how could I not? It's a unicorn and dragon BFF duo that are all about validating one's feelings and boosting confidence. Count me in. The artwork is adorable, playful, and colorful, right alongside messages like, if you feel sad, I'll be right here. Got things to say? Well, I'm all ears. This book is destined to become a classic and a staple for every child, and maybe even adults. Now we have Baking at the 20th Century Cafe, and this is truly the cookbook of my dreams. And honestly, Michelle Polzin is probably my hero. She's without a doubt my style icon. In case you're not already familiar with her, Michelle is the owner of the 20th Century Cafe in San Francisco and is basically the queen of European desserts. And she's blessed us all with her magnificent cookbook that's coming out this October. The photography in this book is next level. It was painful for me to even flip through the pages because I want everything. There's apricot cherry cobbler, Meyer lemon pudding tart, honey cake, date pistachio tort, and so much more. Everyone who loves dessert and or happiness needs this cookbook. I promise you. Furia tells the story of Camila Hassan, a teenage girl living in Rosario, Argentina with a double life. Not only is she trying to keep her relationship with an international soccer star under wraps, she's also hiding the fact that she's a soccer star. When her team qualifies for the South American tournament, Camila gets the chance to see just how far her talents can take her. Perhaps even as far as a scholarship to a college in the United States. This book blew me away. Camila is not only rejecting the idea that girls can't play football, she's rejecting an entire culture that says girls are lesser, that they're weak. I'll be sharing Furia with all of the girls and women in my life for many years to come.